All That Jazz is the film that came out in 1979 that's written and directed by Bob Fosse. So All That Jazz is a film that I've heard about for such a long time. I basically heard about it ever since I started collecting Criterions with Perry. And it's a film that I just recently decided to watch just because for some reason it just felt right. It just felt like it was the time to finally watch it. And obviously I was a little bit hesitant going into this film because even though everybody that I've ever spoken to about this film absolutely loves it, I'm just really not the biggest musical fan. It takes quite a bit for me to feel like I'm invested into a musical. I mean, comedy musicals are great. I like a lot of them. Animated musicals are perfectly fine with me. But for some reason, when it comes to more dramatic musicals, I just can't for the life of me get immersed into the constructed world that they're presenting. And after watching All That Jazz, first of all, let me just say, it's a great film. I really, really enjoy this film. There's so much here that I just got so much out of and just really appreciate on so many levels. But let me just say this. For the first 2/3 of this film, I was scratching my head wondering why people consider this to be a musical. Because there's none of that in here. Like, there's no musical numbers at all for the entire, basically, hour and a half runtime. And, there is one type of musical number in the film, roughly around 45 minutes in, but it's diegetic. Like, it's part of the film's natural world. So for that reason, I was not really considering this to be a musical at all. And then the third act happens, where that's where we finally get the musical numbers, and it lasts quite a while. And when it comes to that, I actually really, really loved it, and it's for a lot of reasons. But before I get ahead of myself and explain why I really did dig the third act, one of the biggest reasons why I just dug this film overall is actually because of Bob Fosse's direction. Don't get me wrong, I think that this film has a strong story and strong character themes and everything like that. Great performances, Bob Fosse included. But it's really the editing style that was brought to the table and just the overall personality that was brought to the table that really made this film stand out and be unique and just made me appreciate it on a whole other level. Visually speaking, when it comes to the editing style, there are these sequences that kind of serve as transitional periods in the film, and it's this kind of like repeating transition that is almost serving like as chapters in the film, and they're very fragmented and borderline surreal and deliver information not only about our character's emotional state, but just about information in the narrative in this very interpretive and creative and, dare I say, artsy way, because I went into this film not expecting it to be really all that artistically daring. But when it comes to the editing, it was surprisingly daring and took a lot of creative risks here and there that I just thought really paid off and really worked out. The sound editing in this film is also quite incredible. There's this one sequence in the film that serves as a pivotal and crucial moment for the main character played by Bob Fosse. And just the way that the sound design is utilized makes it so immersive because it's so delicate and serves its purpose incredibly well. Not only, as I mentioned, did it just enhance and amplify the emotions and just the feeling of that moment, but it also made it a bit psychological. When I was watching that sequence, I was like, this is a psychological moment. And it truly is scenes like that that really made me appreciate this film more than I would have if those little creative touches weren't in there. Because it's just more refreshing to watch a film where you can tell that there's somebody behind the camera having their fingerprints on this and elevating it into a more unique experience that helps stand it out. And this film, by its own nature, feels very autobiographical because Bob Fosse in real life is a director and choreographer and a writer, and in this film he plays a director, a choreographer, and a writer. So I feel like in a lot of ways he was exploring a lot of things about himself through this creative vision. And the themes that he decides to touch in this film have a lot to do with meanings that revolve around making a name for yourself, being caught up and anxious about your reputation. And really, most importantly, this film revolves around fidelity. Like, his entire character is basically somebody who refuses to be loyal to just one woman, but at the same time, he kind of manipulates his own power by making women only be loyal to him. He's a character that kind of wants to have his cake and eat it too, and that's apparent throughout a lot of different moments in this film where we see how his character reacts and goes about setting these unfair and unbalanced boundaries. It kind of explores how, within our main character, Bob Fosse, that he, in a way, uses the hardships that he inflicts on his sexual partners as a way to inspire him creatively. Even with his wife character in this film, it's like whenever any woman that's close to him is feeling hardship, he uses that as a source of inspiration to create his next best thing, and he basically has no shame about it. He's somebody who is incredibly confident and selfish, but at the same time, can be incredibly fragile. And I really love that because not only does Bob Fosse give a great performance in embodying this character, but it establishes who he is and all of his flaws so well that when we finally roll into the third act of this film, it progresses and builds up to something that is so shockingly existential. I didn't expect this film to explore the reality of death in the way that it did. It explores it in such a ironic, celebratory way that feels, in one way, incredibly humorous, but in another way, frightening and incredibly bizarre. And that's basically the hugest reason why I love the musical numbers in the third act of this film, especially the final one. It's just so beautifully crafted because in one way it feels so silly and joyous, but in another way it feels incredibly haunting and damning. And the song is also just incredibly catchy. I think I'm gonna die. I think I'm gonna die. And I also love it because it also conceptually explains this reoccurring piece of narrative information that we've been witnessing the entire film, which is basically this conversation between Bob Fosse's character and this unknown lady dressed in white. And throughout the film, you don't really understand where this is taking place in the story. I mean, throughout it, I just assumed that it was something that took place in the future. And in the way, it is that. But I just loved that element of the film because it adds a layer of surrealness to it that just makes this film even that much more interesting. Unfortunately, I do have a few criticisms with this film. One of them being that there is this sequence that takes place in a hospital, basically nearing the third act. And it just, honestly, for me, it's just way too long. Like, it does hit a point where it's like, okay, we get it. You don't have to continuously show what's happening here, and it just goes on for, in my opinion, way too long. We also get this reoccurring, like, audio bit of dialogue that goes over, like, the 7 stages of grief, and that was, like, repeated a little bit too much, especially within the third act of this film, where I felt like, again, one of those things, we get it, we don't need to hear it again. There's also a few scenes in this film that last quite a while that I honestly don't really think we need. I really think you could just take them out of the film and won't change your experience at all. But all that aside, obviously, I still really, really dig this film. I think it's great and unique and creative on so many different levels. So I'm going to give All That Jazz a strong 8 out of 10.
I think I'm gonna die.
I watched this movie twice, and the first time I watched it, I struggled with the rating for so long and actually ended up giving it a soft 9. But upon rewatch, the things that did bother me the first time, I felt even more on rewatch, so that's why I decided to bring my grade down just a little bit. But again, either way, this is something that I'm definitely going to be picking up on Criterion this upcoming November. And again, please don't forget to share that link around for my film festival. The link will be down in the description box below. I would love to get some more, but again, nobody can access it unless that link gets shared around. So if you know anybody who has any work that they'd like to share, please share it with them and then tell them to share it. So we can have a nice and fulfilling Misfit Palm Film Festival this October. But anyways, that's all I got to say about all that jazz. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the films, give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.